Hello, everybody. I am here with Simone, and Simone and I, we were in the same Delta for 21 weeks. And recently, I've understood that there are very few Delta groups that actually do 3 rounds of the Delta together. And today, we're going to speak about the process that happened for you, Simone, when we were in the 3rd round. So already two times that we had been 7 times together, and then this was the very last thing, and it has to do with you channeling basically the 22 in a creative way of how that unfolded, which is the art that we're going to speak about today. So I would love you to explain a little bit for us, like how it came to you. You're not an artist in like a professional sense, and you're not even somebody who usually paints. So how this thing got birthed through you of painting Gene K22.
All right. So as you said, we were in our 3rd round, and I was in that 3rd round. I was looking to enhance my understanding of each of the keys we were experiencing. And I remember I was in that week, Gene Key 57. And I had been sitting there with my Gene Key book, and I also had Rosie's Wisdom Keeper card out. And suddenly I just had this desire to paint the Gene Key. So I've never painted, I've never taken an art class, I've never held a paintbrush in my hand. And a few weeks before this, I had just been having this desire to paint kind of bubble up within me. And so not having anything, any experience, any tool, anything, I'd gotten online and I was searching on Amazon, and I saw this easel that came with canvases and brushes and paints. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll order that. So that had just come in. And I wasn't even thinking about, painting the Gene Keys. I was, at the time, I was in this cabin right on the ocean. And I guess when the desire bubbled up, I thought, oh, well, I'll just paint the ocean. And then it all came in, and I got it all set up, and I didn't know where to begin. Like, where do you begin when you've never done anything? And so it was set up in my room, and I was just kind of watching it, looking at it, and thinking, what will I paint, and how do I begin? I don't really know, So this day I'm sitting there, and I have the book, and I'm looking at the 57 and Rosie's 57th Wisdom Keeper, and it just sprung from me like, oh, I should paint the 57. And I was like, oh, well, how would I even do that? They don't have a picture of the 57. What would that look like? And then I thought, well, I could ask the 57 how it wants to be painted. And because my own magic is soul communication, I thought, well, why not? So I just put my hand on the book, the page of the 57, where the 57 was, and I was gazing at the 57th Gene Key text, and I just closed my eyes and I said, I'd like to communicate with the soul of the 57th Gene Key. Will you communicate with me? And I heard yes. And then I said, I'd like to paint you. Would you flash me an image? Would you show me an image of how you'd like to be painted? And it just flashed in my consciousness. And so then I I had this awareness also that there was a sacred geometry. And so I said to the Gene Key, I was like, well, would you flash me the geometry that goes with you? And it flashed me a geometry. So I drew out the geometry on graph paper, and I transferred it to the canvas. And then I don't even know what I'm doing, right? Like, I've never had an art class. I don't know how to mix paint, but I figure white and black, gray, I can do that. So I open the drawer of the easel, and there's a bunch of paint in there, and I don't even know what I'm doing. I just look for white and black, and I pull out white and black, and I start mixing it on my palette and painting when I saw. And I didn't even realize that my kit had come with like watercolor tints, acrylics, and oils. And so my first piece, it jumbles all of that together because I don't even know to look for, well, what kind of paint is this? I just thought it was paint, paint's paint. What, so I painted it. So then with each week, the next week, I painted the 12, and then the next week I painted the 22. So that's what we're going to talk about today specifically, is the image that came through for the 22. So I did the same process. I just put my hand on it. I looked at 22nd gene key and I asked for the image, and it showed me the image. And when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, that's a little over my skill level, because I'm, considering myself just, a kindergartner in terms of painting, right? So, but I thought, okay, well, if it flashed it to me, I should be able to do it. And we'll look at the image in a minute, but I remember, and I asked for the sacred geometry. So I did the same process where I drafted the sacred geometry, transferred it to the canvas, and then painted the picture. And I remember I worked on that one because it was challenging, because it's multidimensional. And at one moment I didn't even understand, well, how does this even represent the gene key 22? And I came back to my book and I was like, oh, it's the involution and the evolution through nature, in a sense. So that was my process, and it's super exciting to share it with you.
So here we have the painting that came through for you. And I just feel it's so interesting because first you send it to me and I was looking at it, and there are so many possible interpretations for somebody who sees that the same thing as a tarot card or anything. But then when you start to tell me about what this means and what that means, I feel like there are so many things that I want to ask you about it. And maybe first you can just tell us a little bit about what the symbolism of it is.
Great. So when I first saw the flash, what I saw was the oak tree with the roots going down into the ground. And then I perceived that it was like going through a vase, and that there was snow coming up. And then as I was painting it, I realized, oh, this is a keyhole or a portal into the heart of Mother Earth, and revealing the fire, water, which also creates the steam of Mother Earth. So I realized it was a keyhole or a portal into the heart of Gaia. So we have this oak tree descending down with its roots, right? And then we have the heart of Gaia ascending up with the fire, water of Gaia. And then I didn't quite understand why this, at the end of the flash, the yellow light flew through the picture across the oak tree. And I didn't really understand that until recently. I was talking to an amazing friend of mine, Dominique Sire, and I said to her, she goes, oh, we were talking about the picture, and she goes, oh, and that the yellow is the union of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And so, we were talking about how the sky is the divine masculine, and the crown of the oak tree is the divine feminine. And inside of Gaia, we have the divine masculine in the fire, water going up. So we have the masculine in the feminine, and the feminine in the masculine. And then inside the tree, we have the union of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And we were talking about how, well, so when I didn't understand that the images, and I went to the Gene Key book again, and I was reading Gene Key 22, and I had the big awareness. Oh, this is a fabulous depiction of the involution and the evolution. So energy flowing up and the energy descending down. And so that's the sacred union too in that picture. And I saw it when I went back to review my Gene Key 22. And then just recently I was talking to my friend Dominique, and I said to her, I understand the grace and the graciousness kind of by cellular imprint when I look at that that image, but I never really have been able to understand the dishonor. And we were talking about that, and she goes, "Oh, I get it. We dishonor our divine masculine and our divine feminine when we don't allow them union." And in this picture, you've captured the union of divine masculine and feminine. And the dishonor is when we don't allow for the integration of the divine masculine and divine feminine, the sacred union, which is truly like graciousness and grace, right? So it's so in I think part of the process that's been so interesting is the unfolding, because I don't have any judgment about the whatever the gene key flashes me. I just accept it, right? I don't have to understand it. I don't have to logic through it. I just have to remember what it flashed me and try to capture it as best that I can. That's my heart's desire, to capture what it shows me the best way I can. But what I've learned through the process of painting, just like you said, it's like it reveals itself to me through the process, the secrets embedded in um, the image unfold as I've worked with them. So that's been a really beautiful part of this process of painting.
Yeah, and thinking about the process, so we recently also spoke about, we took your process of soul communication and we used it for the 25th gene key, and actually we're tapping into the 36th, the 15th, like it was more coming through. And that is your genius to have this communication. What I feel is so interesting with the 22 is that the 22 is that involution of bringing the divine into form, so that you are actually here painting that 22. So it goes from like being the communication that you do all the time to actually taking it into form with your hands, with your creativity, with your right brain, and how that then shows us that both the masculine and the feminine, both like consciousness, and that skill somehow that you have to tap into that consciousness that could be seen more like the divine masculine, but it's taken into form in the involution. And so it's that to me is even more interesting, because this is not something that you do. This is something that came to you very recently.
Yes. Just, it's the magic of the unfolding. I can't tell you how many times I've wondered, would I have gotten there if I hadn't been so committed to our delta? If our delta hadn't been so committed to our delta? I mean, in our delta, we were each so committed to each other and to the delta as a whole and to the process. And I can't help but wonder if part of my unfolding, unlocking of my own DNA isn't because of the magic of really being in a delta that um, just unlocked me. I feel like our delta unlocked us all, and the fractal of, consciousness as a whole. I mean, that's why we were doing the work. But I feel like the unfolding of that was a part of the delta process for me. So
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because when I see the picture, I am thinking about Joan, who is one of our Delta sisters. That's
yes.
her energy comes to me, and her way of like kind of navigating, I think, also the two worlds of being very, very much out in the world, but also the deep meditation, the deep kind of bliss into form that she's also representing. So
Absolutely.
and somehow also that it came at the end, because I even remember even my desire to go deep the third round. So this is also something with the delta, knowing now, being also working with the delta as a focalizer, that many groups only do one round, and that is considered a delta. And there was something for me that actually, before starting doing the focalizing, I didn't even know that the delta was one round. For me, it was like, I even remember in the beginning there was like a little bit of hesitance for one of the participants if you were going to be able to, or if you wanted to continue. And for me, it was like, it was already so set that it had to be. It was like the consciousness knew we wanted to be together for that amount of time, for the 21 times together.
Yes. Yes. I absolutely agree. I mean, I knew when I signed up, I was all in. I had this knowing that, okay, this is all, I'm all in. And there was so much magic about that. But the peeling back of the layers, the accessing more of ourselves. And it wasn't always easy, right? It didn't get easier in a sense as we went through. The contemplations were deeper, deeper, deeper. And I think many of us, in our group, we experienced the disequilibrium
Yeah.
of going within. So it really took this kind of magical commitment from each of us to have that experience. And for me, it unlocking through these paintings has just been, I think, a testament to the magic of the Delta process, right?
Yeah, and there's something too. It's so interesting that this is kind of becoming about the delta, and I think there's something too. There is a music of the delta. They're all harmonic gene keys, and there's probably something that wants to come through in this conversation.
I was just wondering, what is that? Like your magic of being able to see big pictures and unify many different things. I was wondering how what we're talking about really relates to the 22.
Right. I mean, the first thing that I was saying first when you spoke to us about the different, colors and different mediums, it was, I feel like when I read the 22, I feel more it's the involution of the divinity coming into form. And when I read the 55, I feel like it's more like consciousness, rising up. However, when you were speaking of the different mediums that you're using, is my internet okay? Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With the different mediums, I feel like what we were saying in the 22, there's like three paths of like seeking. So it's the Buddhic path, the path of mindfulness, is the Christ path, the path of sacrifice, and then it's thought, or he has different names, right? For the alchemical path. And these are all like, they're male avatars of consciousness, and also consciousness more being maybe, the Shiva or the masculine. And then they are coming through the 22, which is the Shakti, which is the feminine form. So I do feel that, yeah, I do feel that the 22 is here. I do feel like it's resonating, speaking about feminine and masculine, because when we speak about Buddha, Christ, or thought, it's like you don't, yeah, maybe in Christ you can feel the feminine because the lamb, the tenderness, but I feel like this is the container for form is the container for consciousness to come through, and that is what the 22 is showing us. And also that vase, like we showing it again, you can maybe speak a little bit more about what is in the vase. Like you were speaking about the water, but it's not only water. Like what it and the key. Like tell us a little bit about the vase and what you see, the symbolism.
Yeah, so when I first got the flash of the image, it was the way I could wrap my consciousness around it was, oh, that's like a bulb vase, a vase that's shaped like a bulb and actually holds a bulb that can root into water. And but in the image, it was almost like the white part was snow, but the snow was going up. And so I was like, well, how does snow go up? And how am I going to paint snow rising up? But then as I was painting that shape, I was like, oh my God, this is a keyhole into the heart of Gaia. And this is the fire water, the most sacred place where fire and water are one. It's again the masculine and the feminine inside the heart of Gaia, which creates the steam. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's not a bulb base, it's the keyhole to dimensional portal into the heart of Gaia. And what you were saying about how all those masculine things of thought are being held in birthed into form through the divine feminine. So the divine feminine is holding the space through the 22 so that all this consciousness can come into being. So powerful.
Yeah.
And then you know, it's the union of all that. Um, you know, the if we don't, if the feminine isn't holding the space, we have no place to ground it in into physical form. So yeah.
And I feel like this that you what you have painted and the awareness of what we're speaking about is coming through the gene keys. It's like it was a process that came through the delta that was channeled by the living transmission of the gene keys. Because I've been sitting preparing for this in the 64 doors for the 22, looking at it from a human design perspective, where it's kind of, this like melancholic half crazy artist that has to express, and it's like there is so much actually shadow in it almost, but in a beautiful shadow, because melancholy and all that creates art. But there is, when we are like, yeah, I feel like when we add the gene key wisdom to it, we can see that the artist, or the pressure to express, is like, yeah, there is a pressure for the womb, in the womb to create. That pressure is constantly there, and it is going to, if it's unconscious, it can come out. Like, it doesn't care really about what it creates in the shadow frequency. But that's where also I feel like what you're painted, and when we have the gene keys, is always the integration. So in your painting, you're speaking about the integration of the feminine and masculine. In the gene keys, we speak about also the integration of the shadow, right? It's always integration. That's where we don't go out in the extremes and in the polarities and only live one side of it.
Right, exactly. I mean, in fact, I believe that the more we face our shadows and really embrace them, that's when we integrate. That's where if we're unable to integrate those shadows, um, it's almost like the fire water. It's like how we evolve and how the alchemical process um, moves, and the more we're able to look at our shadows and embrace them fuller and fuller and fuller and fuller, that we get to experience the more fullness of the gift, the more fullness of the city, and all its shades. So yeah, I agree with you.
And I feel this is part of like what I can see, even the mirroring of the delta, and what I was craving at the end, and what I can kind of even became a bit radical about. I can feel that the delta gives us an opportunity to revisit our true, authentic expression over and over again. And even the fact that, like, we haven't explained exactly how the delta dance works, but you have 7 keys, and you're focusing on one key every week, and you do basically the same order of keys 3 times. And what I feel is like, it's really a dance where, in mirroring 6 other beings, we get the opportunity to tap into that. And it's like, every time that you tap into it, it becomes more powerful as the delta is going. And if you don't do it, like, the tension and the friction, like you were speaking about, also becomes more tense, because it's like, now you have experience with it now, so it's like you're asked to kind of, existence asks you to step up in the way that you show up every time. And it's so subtle in one way, and it's so powerful, and especially through the mirroring of three individuals that become one on the same dance.
Absolutely. And the courage, I think through the process, I had more and more courage to face my own shadows through that dance, because there was an intimacy through each cycle of the dance. And, trust was built. Things were exposed within ourselves, within our delta, within each other, and there we are, we're doing our dance. And the more you dance, the more you see in the dance, right? The more you feel in the dance. And to have the courage to stay with that. Um, yeah, it was super powerful. That third round, I think, in some ways, I think our third round was the most turbulent and the most graceful. The
Yeah.
most graceful. Um, and it was through the turbulence that we actually um, experienced more of the grace. And so interesting, the word turbulent just kind of flew out of me, and I was like, oh, well, that's the 57, which was my first one to paint. is the turbulence there. And um, but I think that it was through the turbulence that we got through to graciousness and grace in the Delta. Um,
Yeah, I and I see also the analogy with the 22, which is, the birthing process is turbulent. Like it's always when something comes through form, like it's like there's so much consciousness, and then the density of the form, and when something has to go like to pack itself into that density, it has to be turbulent, but it's also that's the two sides of the 22. It is that turbulence, that pressure, and then the graciousness when we accept the form that wants to be taken in the density somehow.
right? Oh, what a beautiful way of capturing that. Yes, yes, yes. And as we were talking, I was suddenly like having this desire in myself to go back and look at all 7 of the Delta keys and really look at the pathway of the shadows and see how they connect, and look at the pathways of the gifts and how they connect, and look at the cities and how it connects. Because it was striking me that I have the 22nd sitting right next to me, and I didn't feel dishonor like in our I didn't experience the dishonor, and I was having the awareness that it was through turbulence. Like we had moments of turbulence within ourselves, and
Yeah.
sometimes there was turbulence within our group, which we openly kind of talked about, but I felt like there was honoring within our group. So maybe it was because we were able to marry, to merge in the conversation. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. But
I started to want to pull up the shadows, but yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with everything you said, and I feel like what I've seen now again, like being a focalizer, is that the delta brings up things that we don't know. Like this is the thing about coming into form too. It's like you are as a woman, you will carry a child for 9 months, and you don't know what's going to come out. Like it's the genes that is like it's a magic. It's like it's magical. So that's something I feel is a similar thing. It's a process where you get birthed, and you don't know, and somehow the more traumatic, not the more traumatic, but like the more turbulence, again, the more messy it is, maybe the more magical it comes out on the other side. Or it's like it's not even, it's like there's no attachment to how there's something there where I think how it comes back to the 36 that we were speaking about in the other recording, of like being able to embrace it all and being able to
right,
see. And also what I could feel like, the delta is when you can see somebody else being in that turbulence. It's like the compassion is all again the 36. What happens when you can mirror a sister, like because that's how it felt, and be like, I know what you're going through, and I've been there. And it's also, if you don't have that naturally in yourself, it's the delta process make you do that, because you're going to know that last week I was in that jinky, in that position. So it's creating this place where we can put each other in the other person's situation and feel what that is. So it's creating empathy through a process that we don't really know what kind of flight we're getting on, I think.
I remember there were weeks when when we started the call, and I was in a great mood. I had so much love, so much joy bursting out, and everything was just like feeling so wow, open. And then we get in the call, and somebody, we were all listening so intently to each other, and somebody would start talking. It was like that thing was opening me up like a can of tuna. It was my turn to share. I was like crying, and and there it all was. And it's so interesting. I just looked down at Jinky 22, and my eyes rested on grace under pressure. 22 is grace under pressure. And then that made me flash back to the image of the painting. And when you think about an oak tree, right? An oak tree is just so strong, and its roots, so rooted. And I just had this awareness, like when I saw that, I was thinking about the grace of an oak tree under the pressure, and then the grace of that fire water of Gaia coming up. It's like through the steam of the pressure of the fire and the water coming up. It's the grace of it all. And that through the pressure we can experience the grace, right?
Yeah, and somehow, because it is the pressure to express in gate 22 and the openness, and I feel like that's also what the delta is about. Maybe the delta could be explained through the 22, because it is this, there is 1.5 hour designated every week at a certain time where you commit and show up, and you commit to openness. I mean, there's actually nothing else that you have to commit to. You just commit to be open, to receive the others, and to give of yourself. So there is somehow how this 22 is almost a process, explaining the process, I feel.
Right. Exactly. It's so fascinating to me that our intention was to talk about the 22, and here, we've shifted to this amazing discussion about the delta, which is, clearly what wanted to be born, right?
Yeah, I had a similar thing earlier today too, when I was going to speak about a certain gene key with somebody, and it turned out to be on the profile 3435. So it's like seemed to be an agenda that is like, what wants to come into form. It's not what.
It will find its way. It will rise up.
Yeah,
That's so
and this
fascinating.
is beautiful too, because when I brought up the table with for the delta, and we can see that the second position is the 22, and it has this. It's about relationship healing. It's like, wow, if we would say one thing for the delta, it's a lot of that, because I think it's part of what I was saying before. We're not so used, or some of us are too used to it, like, oh, we're empath, blah blah blah, too used to put ourselves in the other person's perspective, or the narcissist and the empath. There's so many polarized way of looking at relationship, but I feel like the delta gives us the opportunity to actually, in a very mapped out way, to be able to connect to each other, and also have this dance where, okay, I'm taking your position, okay, I'm holding it here, I'm holding harmony in the delta this weekend, okay, or I'm holding this. So it's really set up to create healing, and to create so many people. I think, we're just like, we just want to be heard, we just want to be understood in relationship. That's the most, we just want to come across. And there is something with the delta where it really gives the opportunity for that, and that is why it has to do with relationship healing. And also, I actually didn't remember this, but when you say the dishonor is when the masculine and the feminine are not integrated. Again, relationships, the masculine and the feminine, they're integrated. So otherwise, we would fall down into the dishonor. So it's so interesting to just look at, the keywords that I wasn't even aware about before we started speaking.
Yeah, and I love that you pull this up, because it reminds me of how um, in the delta we're intensely focused on ourselves, but we're just as intensely focused on the collective. I mean, each week I took my life focused responsibilities so um, to heart that if I were holding relationship healing for the group for that week, I really you know did that so intentionally. All the while I was exploring the 22 for myself, like, what does this mean to me? What is this um un um revealing for me? What am I able to look at and learn through the 22 dishonor, graciousness, and grace in me, while holding that for the collective and the group, the relationship healing. So it was so fascinating to focus on both at the same time.
Yeah, and now also speaking about the form and the mother, when I'm thinking about, so we have those seven gene keys, the 12th, the 22nd, the 6th, the 59, the 27th, the 50, and the 57. So we know, like I was saying before, they're all like harmonic, they will have a tone to them. But when we look at them in the body graph, like this
Mm.
also brings me kind of to the divine, you know, the form, because when we look at them in the body graph, you can see that they are creating a circuit that is not a circuit that we use in human design, but it goes here from the sacral, comes up to the 50 in the spleen, the 57 from the spleen up to the throat in the 20, over to the 12, down to the 22, going down to the 6 and back to the 59. So it kind of has this, you know, the center of the profile, kind of like, you know, it's really, there's something so much about embodiment and the way that it's sitting in the body graph. And it's almost like, you know, a kind of womb, you know, it's like, it's grounded in this sacral energy of caring and intimacy in the 27 and the 59. And then it comes out through presence and, you know, purity. And then it's like, it's somehow so magical that it's almost like a keyhole or a womb, even the way that it looks when we look at the geometry of it.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, to see that keyhole right in the body graph is so powerful for me right now. And when we even looking at the white lines in this body graph, you know, and it reminds me of how, you know, the white lines in the keyhole or the vase, you know, the container, the multi-dimensional container in the painting. So that's powerful too. What an amazing connection you just made. I love it. And it also helps us understand why the conversation about the delta is bubbling up through a conversation about the 22, right?
Yeah.
That they're both containers for us, for graciousness and grace and relationship healing and grace under pressure, and so beautiful. Also, you know, just glancing down, I would love to hear what you think about, you know, because the codon ring for 22 is the ring of divinity, which you kind of got to when we were talking about the, you know, the three pathways. But other thoughts about maybe the ring of divinity and the way that picture with the, you know, the 22 flashed itself to come to life in. Any thoughts?
So the ring of divinity, that's made up of the 36, the 22, the 37, and the 63. And what I feel is interesting with that is that when we look at the rave mandala and the transits, they are coming after each other. So we were in 37 last week, we're in 63 now, we're going to be in 22 and then 36. So they are all after each other in the rave mandala. And it makes me think of the tarot card, the second card, the high priestess, you know, how she's just sitting there gestating, she's not doing anything. It's like her form that is holding and waiting for something to be gestated. And that's so much the process of the feminine. And that's what I feel, it's not really what if we read about the codon ring of divinity, but with this conversation, I feel that is the message that this codon ring somehow is bringing for us.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, because the divine feminist holds the space for it all to come through. So with that, you know, without that gestation, what, you know, what's possible? We need that gestation period for things to come into life force, energy, and have the experience.
And somehow I feel like, again, that's the marriage of the feminine and the masculine, but the feminine is holding space, it's just stating, but you need the awareness of the masculine, you know, the awareness
Right.
has to be there. And again,
Yes.
that's what's going to make, that's why what comes out after this period of gestation is going to be divinity and not a monster, you know. It's
Exactly.
like, what awareness are you infusing your gestation with, you know? And then of course there's also divine will and all that, but like there's something where actually we have, you know, we have, there's an attunement that we can make that comes with awareness, where actually I feel like even if we're speaking 37, like the messiness of life, or 63, the like there's always, that's what I could feel too in the delta, the octaves. It's like, you know, C exists on many different octaves. So like there, that's somehow what we tune into. What do we infuse our gestations with? What tone do we decide to like
Yes.
to actually, you know, come through?
Beautiful. That was a beautiful way of expressing that. I agree.
Yeah.
uh, I think you and I have talked about how uh, so playing with the octave and the harmonic, that when we got to the third round of our delta, everything was so distilled that if there was just a blip that wasn't in harmony, it really was so evident. It was so, even though it might have been just something very small, but it was, we felt its presence so infinitely. And like you were saying earlier, it's important for us to look at all those blips and our shadows and everything, so that we can have higher and higher harmonics of the gifts, the cities, whatever, you know. We need it all. We need it all. Yeah.
And so much, maybe this is through the eyes of the 36 and the 22, is that what I could feel when those blips of inauthenticity came, either if it was in me, I was like, wow, that's interesting, because I could feel kind of part of what I was saying maybe was a bit like through the voice of drama, you know, and I like, you know, I'm kind of playing a role so that you're getting a story from me so that I can make a point, you know, and that's not really, that's not really what I want to do, although my point might be beautiful. So that was, and that was one way of, and the other was in others. But actually, instead of judging that in authenticity, there was this like, wow, now I see how it looks, like now I see from the other side. So it even became this kind of almost like detective thing, like, you know, you're detecting these little things and you're becoming so fine-tuned in that knowing, in that feeling when there's a little bit of interference. So it was,
Yeah. And then you take that knowing, and once you have it, once you've unlocked it, then it's like your lens carries the wisdom of that energy that's unlocked, and then you go back and look at everything else. And I would find myself going back to, oh, when that happened in Delta One, you hadn't unpacked in yourself this awareness about this about you. And you know, so it was so multidimensional in terms of uh how the awareness that arose through whatever, you know, process, that it not only unlocked right there in the moment, but it unlocked what was and what is. And you know, it was just an amazing process of awakening and knowing. Yeah, so.
mm. Well, I, this is like, this became much richer and much more than I could than I thought, than I could imagine, and it's so beautiful. And I, you know, this is that what wants to come into form, like we were saying, it's going to come into form. So thank you for coming with me on this journey, and also thank you for sharing, you know, some a baby that was newly born, because this is one, you know, this is one of your first paintings that came into the world, and also, you know, the vulnerability in being able to show our creative processes. I'm reading a book now, it's called The Creatrix, and the first chapters are about that, like how easy it is to say, but I'm not an artist, or is it good enough? And especially for actually female artists to be able to feel that it's ready to be shown to the world. Like, thank you for your courage, and thank you for your willingness to do that.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It was so my pleasure, so much my pleasure. I feel like they're coming through and they want to be shared, and to be invited and honored in such a lovely way means so much. So thank you, and it was my pleasure.
Thank you.